Hello Chipmunk and Chipette fans, and welcome to another Alvin and the Chipmunks Elaboration podcast. My name is Grandy Tamayas, and today's topic will be, what if Robert Zemeckis directed an Alvin and the Chipmunks film? So for those of you who may have listened to my podcast about the Bagdasarian versus Universal lawsuit, I briefly touched on this topic and said that I would be coming back to it on a later date. And I know this sounds crazy, but yes, this was real. Robert Zemeckis, the same guy who directed the Back to the Future trilogy, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and a few movies starring Tom Hanks like Forrest Gump, Castaway, and The Polar Express, was going to direct an Alvin and the Chipmunks live-action film back in the late 90s. At that point, the franchise was part of Universal, who were contractually obligated, and failed, to promote the Alvin and the Chipmunks characters in theme parks, merchandise, television, and of course film, which only resulted in two very underselling direct-to-home video films of the Chipmunks against Universal's movie monsters, but that's beside the point. Unfortunately, and from what I've been able to gather, Robert Zemeckis was caught up in other projects and eventually lost interest in doing a Chipmunk film. Him being signed on to the project at one point, well, actually the project even existing at one point, is really the only thing we know about it. We don't have any details on pre-production, the cast, concepts, plot details, if there ever were any, or anything of that nature. So the best we can do is speculate on what could have been. Two of the biggest questions I have about this hypothetical film are what the Chipmunks would have looked like and what effects from the time would have been used to bring them into a realistic setting. CGI of the 1990s wasn't that advanced, for lack of a better term, especially for movies that weren't mega-budget Hollywood blockbusters like Jurassic Park or Independence Day. Those definitely still hold up today, but a lot of cartoon-based films from then and later on in the early 2000s haven't done so well. Live action Scooby-Doo. And for as good as the CGI was in the Fox Chipmunk movies, especially in Road Chip, I would have loved if they had used practical effects at times, such as animatronics or puppets. If those films had been made in the 90s, I think there would have been a greater chance that they would have relied on practical effects. As for the designs of the characters, it's really anyone's guess if the Chipmunks would have been as big as they were in the 80s series, or if they would have appeared smaller and more real chipmunky, similar to the Fox ones. I've heard people say that the 3-foot-tall chipmunks of the 80s would be terrifying in live action, so if they made them small in the Fox movies for that reason, I can understand that. If they would have been that large in Zemeckis' film, then the Chipmunks probably could have been played by short people in costumes, similar to the Jawas and Ewoks from Star Wars. Then the voices could have been dubbed over by Ross Bagdasarian and Janice Carmen, or whoever would have voiced them, which leads me to a third question. Would they have kept Ross and Janice as the voices for the Chipmunk characters, reprising their roles from the 80s cartoon, or would Universal Studios have insisted that they go with star power and have the Chipmunks be voiced by younger celebrities? Because for those of you who don't know, Ross and Janice did originally want to voice the Chipmunks in the 2007 movie, but Fox insisted on Justin Long, Matthew Gubler, and Jesse McCartney for Alvin, Simon, and Theodore respectively. Same for the Chipettes in the 3 sequels, other than I think one line where Eleanor is talking to Ian Hawke in the scene where the Chipettes meet him for the first time in the second movie. But I think that was a production/editing error because they had Janice's voice as a placeholder until they could do the recording sessions with the real actors, just to give them an idea on how they should perform their lines. Ross also wanted to portray Dave in live action, but due to him being 58 years old at the time they filmed the first movie, Fox insisted that they cast Jason Lee instead, who again also would have contributed to that star power factor. Ross was about a decade younger when this Robert Zemeckis film would have been made, so age-wise, maybe he still could have worked, but I wouldn't be surprised if Zemeckis or the studio advocated for a different actor, maybe even Tom Hanks. That would be something to imagine, Tom Hanks playing Dave Seville. Story-wise, it's really anyone's guess how well a 90s Alvin and the Chipmunks film would do under Zemeckis' guidance. I'm not discrediting any of his accomplishments, but big-name directors don't always mean the best possible movie. I don't doubt that he'd be able to make a good Alvin and the Chipmunks movie, though. In fact, I would definitely trust him. But like I said, there are no plot details, so we don't know anything about what Zemeckis would have to have translated to the silver screen and how he would do it. Anyway, that's where I'll leave this elaboration. I can't say for certain what would have happened if this hypothetical film had been made, or the effect that it would have had on this franchise as a whole, so I'll leave it up to you to discuss in the comments if you'd like. Though more than likely it would have changed history, so the 2015 series would have never happened, and for all we know, the Chipmunks could have stayed at Universal, though I think it was for the best that they left. Not to mention that I, and probably a lot of you, had not even been born when the Robert Zemeckis Chipmunk movie would have been made and released. So, yeah. It's a bummer, I guess, but we're never going to know. So with all that said, I hope that you enjoyed this podcast, and thanks for listening. Don't forget that you're welcome to leave a like, subscribe, and please consider sharing this podcast around the Chipmunk fan communities. Okay then, have a nice day.